Hi, everyone in Supernal world. Great to be with you today. Great to have your presence with us. And today I'm really blessed to be interviewing a wonderful man who is many, many things, including a druid. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce Pete Blake today. Hi, Pete. How's it going?
Hi, Freya, it's good. Thank you for bringing me along.
It's good to have you here. This is a really fascinating subject matter because Druidry is one of those terms that evokes mystery just in hearing the term. And I wonder if that, how is it that that sense of mystery, how does that play into becoming a druid, like when you began?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think for me it was so much the mystery. It was more about connecting to my own ancestral past. I think the more I've journeyed with it, maybe the more the mystery aspect of it may have come in. Yeah.
It's interesting. Okay, so many paths to lead to druidry. It's one of those terms that you get, you definitely get that classical ideology of a
The bearded man in a robe, yeah.
yes.
Or Asterix. That's the other one that everyone references, yeah. Asterix comics.
I imagine that it must have been at one time a much more difficult path. These days, druidry is effectively the same, but here in Australia, it's different in that we have a completely different environment. We have a bush, we have desert, and you referenced something that you wrote in your article, was about in the homeland, the origins of druidry coming from the Celt traditions. There was more mounds, and there were little nature altars and all sorts of different things around the place. But in Australia we don't have that because we have
well nowadays we don't, but there's more of the sacred sites or those places that are more inherently sacred, are more established within the UK landscape.
Yes.
And are marked. People have been using them through the pagan traditions, and then filtered through into the more folk traditions once the Christian period of time took over, I guess. So whereas here in Australia we're not quite so I mean, obviously our Aboriginal people have their sacred sites and have their connection to the land. So yeah, it's us working with the land is different. We have to also respect their culture and their traditions. So we've got to be mindful about if we step into a space that we can feel the sacredness of, and that the tangibility of that sacredness is really apparent to us. We have to start thinking, well, is it okay for me to use this space? Is this a sacred site for the Aboriginal people? Therefore, do I have is it okay for me to use this space? Am I interrupting stepping into their traditional places? It's
so that was interesting. You said if it becomes apparent or you feel that in a place. So can you talk to me a bit about that? What do you mean by how does it become apparent, or how do you feel or notice that? What's that about?
We all know. I mean, we all feel things, and when we start to become mindful of the way things make us feel, we have that awareness around, so we may step into a space and we feel a sense of connection to that space. We might be drawn to a particular place within that space. Maybe things look a little bit brighter, the light may change, our awareness may shift a bit, even to some degree, our consciousness may alter. We may go into a more meditative state in that area. Our awareness shifts into different places within that space. I think it's all different depending on where the place is, because I walking through somewhere like the Blue Mountains, I could feel the energy of the place coming up my legs, where I might go into a different environment and then the energy will approach me in a different way. So it's hard to define what exactly it could be, but it's when things become more tangible, you can sense them, they're more apparent to you. I think a lot of the time it's something to be you grow a mindfulness and awareness of it, and then it becomes more apparent.
Yeah, so it's sensory perception. Yeah, so mindfulness in the terms that you're stilling your mind, paying attention, listening, feeling, and then how that place responds to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Understand. There was a place I went to in the South Australian desert, Flinders Ranges area, and it was very much like that. Very, very clear song lines, go this way, walk this way, and I could feel the energy pulling me. In fact, it's interesting, different places, some feel you can have a stronger relationship with than others.
Definitely.
So, yeah, some place, do you experience, so the other things I consider, synonymous with Druidry is like the master with animals and plants, and that connection with nature really deeply, like understanding for want of a better term, I'm probably not using the right term, so forgive me, but the medicine of that plant or that animal.
Sure.
And perhaps even how it is that where that plant fits into the cycle of nature or the attributes of nature, because some things are astringent, some things are watery. There's all these different elements to nature and how they
some things everything has a cycle. So within nature, some things go dormant at a certain time, the sap rises at another time. So how that responds to you and how it responds to the environment it's in is different. And I guess therefore when you then interact with that plant in some way, the response will be different as well. Plants are something that is big in Druidry, and I think a lot of it comes back to the perspective of Druidry can be seen as a bit more of an animistic tradition for a lot of us. So it's about, Druidry is about relationship. So and therefore so is animism. It's taking it away from the more indigenous aspect, looking at animism and putting it in a bit more of a modern context. So it's all about living in relationship with the environment that we're in and not seeing ourselves as separate, but seeing ourselves as part of a whole. And then obviously being a part of a whole, we're in relationship with everything around us. So, and I think when we start living that way and we start understanding things differently, we start building connections and relationships, and things, as you say, in responding, things respond to us differently. it's only natural that when we start listening and taking notice and communicating with something, however that communication may be, things start to become apparent, and they're realizing that you're taking notice of them in however way they communicate. And you build that relationship and connection, and it just grows over time. It's like anything, any relationship. You can't just step into a space and expect to know everybody. It's like making new friends. You have to build a relationship.
Yeah. And so the plants in your own relationship with Druidry, and what are some of the ways that you connect with nature and plants and the cycle of time as expressed by nature?
Well, the big part of Druidry and even paganism in general is that has become that concept of what we call now as the wheel of the year, which is more about noticing the cycle of seasons, and then having different points on that we then they're like anchor points. So we're tying ourselves into different aspects and time of the year within that wheel, and then we'll notice through our observation and through building relationship how the cycles of the seasons affect the plants, the animals around us, but also how they then affect us internally as well, because there's an interconnection there. So when we all know that at different times of the year, we respond differently, and it's all about taking notice of that and being more aware of how that works, and how the cycles of the seasons affect us personally. And then it allows us to then have a bit more of a guide on how we work as well, and the best time for us to do things. And we know, I know when there's a certain time of year where I tend to retreat inward a little bit more, and there will be another time where I'm a lot more active. So I know to what times of the year I'm better doing certain things than others, I guess. So observation.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. And so with the seasons out, winter's cold. Unless you really like the cold, you're not going to be hanging outside so much. Unless you like being wet. You'll be inside. Some people do, though. Some people, so I get that.
Well, I mean, as somebody like myself who loves hiking, who loves getting out and exploring nature at this time of year when the fungi's coming out,
Yes.
and it's the difference between UK or European Druidry to Australian Druidry is in their winter time, things become dormant. Whereas in our winter time, the rains have started. Our dormancy is more in summer when everything's retreating because of the intense heat here and bushfires. Whereas everything comes alive there in summer, and here everything starts to come alive with the first lot of rains and everything. So winter's about new life and new growth. So there's a real difference in how the seasons interplay in traditional the traditional cycle of seasons to us, obviously. So I love this time of year. I'll get out and go hiking in the rain.
Brilliant.
Explore the fungi and take photos.
And I mean, I myself have not ever studied Druidry as a pathway myself. So although I feel like when I'm listening to you and when I'm reading your article answers and all of those things, I feel like, Druidry, from what it sounds like, is like really the curiosity the desire to know thyself, right? But through the relationship with nature, it's like the curiosity of a child in a way, isn't it? To and to really, like
You start
observe.
seeing the world in a new way,
Yeah.
and you're looking at things deeper, and yeah.
I can share a little experience I had because we're talking about fungi. I can relate. I'll call myself a fundamentalist because I'm just like obsessed with this stuff. It's crazy. So, when I went to visit a dear friend of mine on King Island off the coast of Tasmania, I didn't realize that it is actually one of the most sought after places to go for the amount of varieties of fungi that are there in the whole world. Extraordinary. And I would evacuate the sacred geometry perfection house built in perfect sacred geometry perfection to go explore the bush, because I took my little camera and just took photo after photo of all of these fungi. And this went on for about a week. And I would have experiences like I'd be standing and listening. I don't know how else to describe it, but listening to nature. But I don't mean just the sounds of birds and things. I mean, I was fully present with nature and listening with my heart. And then an idea would come into my head, like, you almost as though, if it wasn't exactly 100%, but like the fungi itself then starts to communicate with you, with your heart. So you can then hear it say, look up, we're not just on the ground. And I turned and see a tree that's covered in lichen with these teeny tiny, few millimeter long, hundreds of them all up the tree. So then I'm photographing all of that. And then right at the end of the time that I was there, I thought, maybe I've explored everywhere. And for some reason, I was taken down a slightly different route into this little protected area in the forest. And there was a shelf fungi there that would have been a meter long.
Wow.
Enormous. And I had this epiphany at that time that fungi was so old and wise that it just didn't let anybody find it. Not to say
Survival,
I'm
I guess.
special or anything. I just mean it wasn't in an obvious location. I feel like you could have walked around it there you could have missed it 1,000 times, and never found it. But just that listening with your heart and that presence leads you to this extraordinary
experiences.
parts of relationship with nature.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's the nail on the head. Yeah, exactly.
So in Druidry, how is it that you get into developing that relationship of the heart with nature so that you can do those things?
Listening. I mean, I think everything, as I said, it all comes down to relationship, and relationship isn't just about, forwardly communicating, but also listening. So I think observation, listening, it's really that mindfulness of how we, it's getting out of your house, I guess, getting out of your house and getting out in there, into seeing what's going on, and not just looking at the bigger picture, but as you say, it's looking at the little things. I think that's one of the reasons I love getting out with my camera, because it draws me into the the small things, small details, not just the big details. And I think that's part of what Druidry does, is it slows you down and brings you back, as you say, brings you back to your presence and puts you in your body, but with the understanding that we're not separate from everything that's around us. We're all interconnected. So we might be in our body, but we're in connection and therefore in relationship with nature that's all around us. We're not separate from it. And I think once you get to that sort of understanding, the more you work with it, and that's what one of the things we do is work with the wheel of the year. And I think the more you journey around that wheel, the deeper the relationship comes, the more observations you have, the more relationship you build up with the world around you and your own environment. And I think that's the difference with us here in Australia, those of us who follow the Druid path, is that we've had to put aside all these book diagrams, and this is how it's done and that's how it's done, because we've had to then look at what the core idea is behind it all, and then apply that into our own landscape and build our own wheels of the year, or our own understanding of the seasonal patterns and what, when the wattles are flowering, or when the trees are flowering, or when the wildflowers are coming up, and when the spiders are coming out, and what birds are active at what times. And I think the more we journey with that, the more it becomes part of who we are. And like anything, when that relationship happens and you build trust with that little environment that you're in, things start to you just harmonize more and live more in tune with what's happening around you. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, it's good. And what about, like, do you do stuff in groups, or is it more solitary, or both?
It is both. It all depends on where you are. I run a group. What we call a group within Druidry is a grove. Trees play a big part. So everything often relates back to nature in some way. So a group is called a grove, and then a larger group might be an order. So you have a Druid order, and within a Druid order there might be one, or there might be many groves within that order. So well, exactly. I mean, if we look at our inner workings with the body is the trunk, and the brain and the is the bracken and the stem. So yeah, so it all relates. But so when I ran a group, we would be called a grove, and people who are of like mind and got, that, I think that's the beauty of having so many teachers in whatever it is. There's always, you get to find people that you resonate with more. So when I ran a grove, then I had a certain amount of people, and they all become friends. A group when you're working in relationship with people, they start to become friends and family of a type. Chosen family rather than blood family. And sometimes you build more relationship with chosen family because you're not, you're drawn to each other for particular reasons. So
I can fully appreciate that. It's true. Meet some of your lifelong buddies in such groves. And do you have to, to run a grove, is there sort of any initiatory pathway with that, or is it something you come to when you feel you're living it and have embodied it then?
For the seeker or for the facilitator?
Facilitator, or either.
Well, for me, it depends. I mean, it depends on who if you're just an independent person who wants to set up a grove. I mean, you can set up a group and say you're this, that, and the other. I mean, there's nothing to say you can't do that. So, but if you're like a student of someone like the Order of Bards of Ancient Druids, and they're one of the largest Druid organizations, spiritual Druid organizations in the world today. So to become and they have a training program, and their training program is a little bit more like, they see it as more of a mystery tradition. So it's a revealed tradition as you journey through it. But in order to set up a grove that is then affiliated with OBOD, or you have to have so many members who are Druids, so they've studied the path of Druidry and have got to the end of the study within their order, and then you can start a grove. Otherwise, they have what they call a seed group. So, but for the main order that I'm a part of, which is the British Druid Order, you don't need any particular requirements. You just need enough people who want to come together and form a grove. And how that looks is up to the people involved and what they want to do, or whoever is the facilitator, how they want to do that. So when I facilitated a grove, it was more of a training grove, because the people who were involved didn't necessarily have a background. So in order for us to work together, everyone has to come in and learn, the group language and the practices that we want to use, and put us all in that similar page, so that we're all coming together at the same point and using the same language.
Okay.
Is there an initiatory path, is what you asked? And yeah, there can be.
There can be. Okay.
Yes, I'm initiated. When I was running a grove, I would initiate. I've initiated people into the group, but it's not necessarily how they all run.
Interesting. So many ways. Okay. And so can you share with us, with me and with everyone listening, some of, I feel like, the best things that have happened for you through connecting with Druidry? How's it changed your life? What are the best things it's...
In terms of changing your life, I mean, I think for me, it's the sense of empowerment that came from being more, it was the sense of awareness. It was the sense of not just going with the flow, but knowing my part in the flow, and understanding the world that I'm part of and the world that I am present to. It was more the empowerment that I got through living consciously and mindfully, which was what sort of kept me where in that avenue of spirituality. But there's been lots of different times that I remember running a grove when I was here where I live, and it's just, I remember standing back and everyone was doing their thing, and just observing everyone and just thinking how heartful I felt, just watching everybody getting along and enjoying it, and that all built up and they were doing it, and it just felt really nice that these people had come together as some sense of family. But there's been other times, I've gone to the UK as well, and standing in a marquee with 200 or so other Druids chanting what we call the Arwan, it's probably like, powerful. So like any tradition where there's this chanting that happens, and it's building up and you can feel the energy rising, and then it dissipates, and at the end, and it's so an experience like that is something I always remember. But there's been other little things along the way that some I wouldn't share so publicly, but I think there needs to be something to keep you there, and for me, there's lots that's happened, and there's lots of little reminders along the way that, such as, you approaching me and asking me to be a part of what you're doing with the magazine. So, there are these little reminders that come along and say, yeah, what I am doing, has purpose and has meaning, and value. And so, yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah. I have one last little question.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to the UK, a couple of times I've been, both times I went to Avebury.
Okay.
Have you been to Avebury?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know there's those trees?
Yes.
So there's a distinct, for those listening.
The beech trees, I think, aren't they?
Yes, the beech tree.
With the beautiful intertwined roots, and I've seen
Total
red
druid
sitting
trees.
around them. Yeah, they're beautiful.
Total druid trees. So
Red ties in the trees. Yeah.
yeah, so what is that? What is it? What is it about those? It's like, I suppose it's like going to a sacred site in Australia.
It is like, well, it is
It is a
a
sacred site.
site. I mean, Avebury. Well, jokingly, Avebury is the only stone circle that has a pub in it. But apart from that,
That's true. It's a good pub too.
yeah, there's a town in there. Yeah. But yeah, no. So that's the sacred site that's been used for thousands of years. That predates Druidry. I mean, most of these stone circles are all, they predate Druidry within the UK landscape as well. So, but obviously, in modern times, these points are all points that we recognise as having a spiritual significance, for whatever reason, be that energetically or just in relationship as a gathering point. So, yeah, it's a really magical spot. I've been there a couple of times.
The energy of those trees.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Phenomenal. Do you have, and I find that too, not just in the UK, but there are places all around the world where the trees have that. There are certain trees that just have this
Presence.
enormous presence, because clearly the relationship with human consciousness is conscious in that place. So why is it the trees, apart from our anatomy, why is it the trees that are so important in Druidry?
Traditionally, I mean, there's a lot of tradition with trees within Druidry, and I think that's a part of it as well. Good question. I mean, what is it about trees? I mean, they're just such wonderful
Beings.
gifts.
It's true.
I love trees. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, part of what with these older trees, what we see is only part of the tree. It's so connected deep down into the ground, I guess. So does that create more of a presence? Maybe. I mean, I've done dowsing before, with a natural resonance group, and it's interesting when you start using dowsing and dowsing with the trees, how they form groups, and not necessarily the ones next to each other. So I'm sure, I mean, there's an intelligence in nature, I guess, and I guess in some way we resonate, with what the trees represent as they stand on the landscape, I guess. I don't know, what is it that you feel when you're in the presence of trees that makes them so profound for you? I mean,
trees that are not young trees. I can share a story. I'm good at sharing stories. I can share another little story. Again, the first time I went to the UK, I'll go with a UK story because I've got stories from all over the place, but because we're talking Druidry, I'll specifically go with these. I went to visit Gog and Magog. So for those listening, they are these 1,000-year-old oak trees that were part of the procession of oak trees, as I understand it, that led to the Glastonbury tour. It's where people would enter to do the ceremonial work to proceed to and from the tour. And so the first time I went there, Gog and Magog were there. Gog was alive. And somewhere in between that visit and then the next visit, I loved those trees. I felt a deep kinship with them beyond rational explanation. The next time I went, somewhere along there, I heard a story that Gog had died, and I was heartbroken. And again, not rational at all. I was just heartbroken that this tree was no longer with us. And when I went back there, I became aware that someone had lit a candle in meditation or reverence, which had been the unfortunate or perfection within the imperfection situation that arose for Gog to pass. There were signs up then everywhere that said no going into the trees. So you were now no longer allowed to go in or put offerings or do whatever. Hopefully this doesn't get me arrested next time I go to England, but I completely ignored those signs. Leapt over the fences while the rest of the people I was with were all very well behaved and staying on the other side of the fence. I went over there and I just went and sat down with Magog, and I just burst into tears. And I was like, I'm so sorry that your beloved is gone. You know, and I just sat with her and I just cried and cried and cried for no particularly rational reason, except that, you know, the relationship that those two trees had spanned more than 1,000 years. And
it's your empathy to that as well.
Yeah, and 1,000 years is a really, really good stint.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a long time to be with someone and then to be without them. So that grief for me was as strong as losing a human loved one, you know? And when I came out of there, I walked up a ways and I was feeling, you know, Magog and everything she was sharing about that experience for her. And I turned around and she showed me her face in, you know how you see it, have trees, you always see it in the fairy stories and everything, the trees have faces and all of the rest. Oh, she had, and the people, interestingly, that I went with had taken countless groups to that point. And they'd never seen that, you know, so I was able to then, because of the intimacy that, or the vulnerability I was prepared to, or just felt, just because of that, and because it was so heartfelt and sincere, there was this enormous revealing of self from Magog. And so this is, to me, that only happens with people when we're all terrified. Let's face it. Most people are terrified of being authentic. They're terrified of being present and speaking about stuff, whether it's pretty or not pretty or whatever, right? Because they're scared of judgment or whatever the stories are. But when you actually get that present and in your heart and that real, and you stuff the signs and the fences, nothing will keep me away from my beloved Magog, and you do that, then boom, there's this something that has just never been visible before. And it's a similar story really to what happened with the shelf fungi. It's what's revealed through that. So the trees, for me, they can live for such a long time. They will remember generations and generations and generations of human beings. And they will remember you, whether you're in that body or a new body. They'll know you, because in all relationships, we pick up where we left off. And that, for me, is probably the most important reason. My sense is that Druids knew this. They know that. They felt about it. They considered about it. They got so in tune with themselves and nature and relationship that the trees revealed that wisdom, and they then revered them more than other beings because of their capacity to live for a long time and remember us lifetime in and lifetime out. What do you reckon?
I think it's a great theory. I mean, why not?
You know?
Made a good story.
Yay! We love a good story. Yeah, that's for me, is that if I could feel that why is it that I feel that way about that tree, those trees?
Because that's how you empathize. I mean, that we all emotionally connect with things. It's why some people can disassociate with the food, the animals that they eat. You know, their pets are these precious family members, yet they can, consume other animals. And I think we emotionally connect with things, some things more than we do with other things. And you align with trees, so maybe you are really a druid in there somewhere underneath it all.
Maybe. Maybe you could run another group and I'll come and find out.
Well, I think my group running days in those sort of ways are probably over for now. But yes, there has been thoughts of running some sort of group again, but we shall see. We shall see. Takes time and commitment.
Yes, it does. It's a big gig. I also concur with that. I'm just getting back into it myself. So, would you like to share anything further? Is there anything else that you feel like is really, really important to speak from your heart to the gang out there?
As I've pretty much been saying, the basis for Druidry, as I see it, it's about relationship. It's not about put the whole word Druidry aside. It's about living in relationship with the world that you are in, and interacting with it on a level that is more than just how can it serve me, but also how can I serve it? Because part of the path of Druidry is of being of service, and that's not just on a human to human level, but on a human to environment level, however that works for the individual person in their life and how that gives them meaning. So I think for me, if you want to take something away from what Druidry may do, if it inspires you to live a little bit more in connection with the world around you, start noticing how the seasons are at the time, and then take a note of how that then feels within your body. How does that season feel within my body? How does that sit with my body? And then when the season changes, okay, so how does that affect me? And just living a little bit more, and then that brings you to a sense of awareness, bigger, more awareness in how we're all interconnected rather than separate. So I don't know.
Fabulous. I love it. I reckon I might be a druid at heart.
Well, we need to get you an e-shirt then, do we?
Woo! I would, so you're one of the very few people I would happily take that journey with. So thank you. It would be fun. So brilliant. We have covered lots of wonderful, interesting, exploratory ground, and I'm inspired to put my hiking boots on. Actually, hey, I've got them on right now, and get out there.
Do it.
Take
Running
the
around in the
Salamans out
rain
for a
and
hike.
country. Yeah.
All right. Well, we will see you again on the airwaves and on. We won't see you on the air. Well, we will. The television airwaves, and we'll see you hear you on the radio waves, and we'll read you in the magazines. And thank you so much for being with me and with everyone today, and for showing up and being of service. You rock.
Thank you for the opportunity. So,
All right. Ciao for now.